don't see you very well. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. I apologize. I somehow my streaming was canceled, and then I had to redo everything. So, anyways, I'll wait a couple more minutes. Again, I apologize. Last minute, there was a little fire to put out, but so it looks like we have some people online. I'll wait another minute. Okay. All right. So I hope everybody is okay. November is almost finished. And even though I have been hoping that my Kickstarter campaign would start last week, it is okay. Everything was pushed back just to make sure that everything is correct. There's a lot of things behind creating a book, and it's a lot more time consuming than people can imagine if they've never written a book. Anyways, for the people that are on, sounds really good. Thank you. So let me just go ahead and start right now. So 2 weeks ago was the second stream, and we talked about nature, because that is a huge theme in the Gray Ant. And it was about when nature prays, which is kind of an interesting title, because you're thinking, why would nature pray? But it was more of talking about kind of the landscape as far as where the Chagu live, these ants that live in the African Sahara. And even though they are part of nature, they are very disconnected with nature. And so one of the themes is harmony and balance, and how that is accomplished. And so we kind of talked about these spiritual aspects as far as, what is nature to the Chagu and what is nature to us. And I think one of the things that I use nature as, the spiritual essence of nature, was kind of harmony. And that's what we talked about in the last stream. So anyways, all right, let me get fixed. Okay, I think we're good. The title was the Silence of the Queen. And even though the word itself is not 100% correct, I did want to use the word silence. So just to give you a step back. So the name of the queen, now again, this was a very challenging book to write, because the names, having a name is actually weaponized. It is given to only those who are worthy, who have gone beyond the call of their duty. And so it's kind of like this earthly accomplishment to have a name. And so in the beginning, the first couple of chapters, nobody has a name except the queen. And the queen's name is Maluki. And I was trying to look for a name that had a combination of Swahili and Bantu language, which a lot of it has Arabic roots. And it's a mixture of like purity, cleanliness, the divine, the chosen, the righteous. And so that is the reason why I chose that. So the queen itself, obviously, this is a matriarchy. And so she is really not present, in a sense that her role is obviously to give life to the colony, but the special moment So, for example, Kiji, the main character, probably in the first 15 chapters, she loves her mother. In fact, when the antlings, when they're first hatched, there's a special moment where there is this embrace. They embrace the mother. Before they embrace, though, um, the queen already tells them basic rules. So they're already indoctrinated the moment that they're born, right? But it's kind of like it's almost like it's kind of like almost like it's a mixture of like servitude and like something capitalistic where they're born, they're put in lines, but the lines have to be straight. They have to sit in a way that shows decorum, that shows correctness, because they live in a world where everything is ritualistic, and anything that is unrealistic, ritualistic, or how you move or how you talk, they use a term is unchagu, which is like it is not worthy. Anyways, going back to the queen, when they're born, she talks about this terminology above myself. So this is a phrase that you'll see a lot in the book, and they use a couple phrases with each other even as they're passing by. So it's a reminder to themselves, but it's a reminder to others, as if to say, this is why we live, this is what we're doing, and it's called above myself. And above myself, in this sense, is like. Um, Nothing is above, um well, as far as them individually, they nothing is, well, I'll reverse it. Nothing is under them, or nothing is above them. So above myself is the colony is what's important. They are not. So as they're laboring, so it doesn't matter if they're laboring in the deeps and they come across these very toxic, poisonous molds, or if they're out scavenging and they're attacked by bordering other insects, such as um, other enemy ants or other life forms or other creatures, um, or they're trying to labor under extreme conditions, such as extreme heat. It's kind of like above myself. It's like this message that fuels their servitude. It pushes them to the limits of them working so hard they don't sleep. They basically work themselves to death because they know that they work for the colony. Nothing is more important than the colony. So the individual, it doesn't really matter. In fact, there's moments that there is a lot of cruelty that is kind of shown. But so the colony is almost like this group think of, they're born, then they see their mother, and the mother's basically saying, by yourselves, you're nothing. Everything you do is for the colony, but in return, the whole colony works for her. Now there's a caste system, which I talked about earlier. You have the queen, and then you have kind of like the virgin queenlings. So the futuristic queens, you have the male drones, but they're kind of like these subtle characters, both biologically and both in the book. And then you have the workers, and then under the workers, you have different divisions. And then under that caste is those who are just barely born. Oh, I also forgot the Sage Sisters and the soldiers. So there's a caste system of, everyone has a role, and these roles are important. And so what this mother does is this queen is that she uses guilt and worthiness as weapons. And what I would like to do is, by the end of the stream, is try to connect it to us, right? So it's easy to read something and understand something, but you're like, well, wait a minute, how can I make this relevant to myself? And I think it's very, very relevant based on a lot of things. So looking from the point of view of of Kiji was the main character, the gray ant. because these are all biologically, these are soldier ants. They're actually called soldier ants. And they have this, they're honey skinned. Um, and it's like this amberish color. And the main character eventually slowly turns into a gray ant. But anyways, so the queen uses mythology, and so that's the backup. So they use mythology and they use guilt and they use worthiness. So how they operate is not only the earthly mother, Maluki, but also the divine mother, which is Mlungu. And in order to get to heaven, you have to be worthy. And how do you display worthiness is by constantly working, constantly laboring, and doing double shifts. And even those who bring food into the colony, everything is rationed. So, it's kind of top heavy. Those who receive the rewards, you don't see it. Eventually you do. And so they've been living like this forever, and they believe that how they live is the right way. In fact, they think that there's this mission that we want to make the entire world through their eyes the Changu way. And if I take a step and I pause, it's just like, if we look at everything, it's just like, wait, is that kind of how we do it? Are there any belief systems out there that want to make it ours? So it doesn't matter if it's micro, so if it's personal, if it's macro, it's like societal or communal or governmental or worldly. It's like, it's always that idea of what I do is the right way, right? And so it's just like ego is there like 110%. So these chagu, love their mother, and when they get to the point where there's a lot of people, I'm sorry, when they get to a point where they're in dangerous areas, to kind of self-motivate, besides about myself, but when they're in these dangerous moments, it's just like, it's for the queen, it's for the colony, because everyone's thinking about the mother constantly 24/7. So anyways, going back to through the point of view of Kiji remembers the embrace, because after there's a small moment of indoctrination, then they all run and rush and they hug mother. And that's the last time that they physically touch her. And more importantly, that's probably the last time they see her. So she becomes very distant. And this helps also with the mythology, as far as if you don't have somebody who's accessible, that also helps with the power dynamic. And so even though the main character goes through these moments and she actually sees with her own eyes the cruelty enforced by the queen or by the queen herself, there's still that missing, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, being in a situation where it could be harmful, but yet it's like there's that small part. It's like, oh, well, I still miss this part, even though like 90% it's harmful for me. So when I tried to write the book, I didn't want anything that's black and white. I didn't want two-dimensional characters, pretty kind of boring. It's like the queen is evil, blah, blah, blah. And obviously, if you think about, even the villains that you love, the villains we love, whether it's either in a book or in a movie, the ones we love the most are the ones that are most complex, right? And so obviously in the book, we kind of dive into her backstory, but what's important is that my focus today is not on necessarily the queen. So we have the queen, her name, why I chose the name Maluki, and then the colony, the structure. So the whole structure is this pyramid, right? Everything. So whether it's the Virgin Queens or the male drones or the Sage Sisters or the soldiers or the workers, which are divided as scavengers and foragers and scouts and the sweepers. Like I make it very complex, but it's all pyramid down. They all support her. So there's this kind of like I use the term crowd think, this group think, like we all think the same. We all believe in the same system. And the system is how we live is the righteous way. And I use righteous, but not necessarily in a religious way. Um, it's like how we do things, like how I do it is the right way. And if you do something differently, then, it's like, well, that's wrong, right? It's interesting as far as humans, we have this kind of like, I don't want to use moral compass. We have this idea of, well, that's wrong or that's right. Um, so, anyways, we have this societal structure that constantly reinforces itself through mythology. So we have the Divine Mother, and then we have the Earthly Mother, Maluki, who's there, and she's just constantly, let's say, breeding just to maintain the colony, and but also to provide order and structure and to make and cleanse the land and make it chagu. So, like, there is no questioning, there is no doubt. In fact, one of the rules is that there's lots of them, um, that you're not to remember. You don't need to remember the past. And why is that? It's like they use it as a form of boasting. The only reason why you want to remember the past is that you want to share something that you did that was boastful. Now, of course, it's corrupted. It's not true. And so you're only supposed to think about today, but more importantly, you're only supposed to think about the future. It's like future, future, future. And I could use this like as far as a religious perspective. The religion is basically do this today for this future. But we can also look at how our society works is how we work. It's like, oh, you need to work now so you can retire in the future because there's always something to work for, whether it's heaven or retirement, but it's always in the future. So it's always that idea. So there's no remembering. And again, this is another weapon. So there's all these weapons that they use. And it's very effective because there's a lot of inner guilt. And I want to talk about that later on at the end of the streaming. So we have the structure and when I'm writing it, and when I was writing out the character and I was writing out the society, like I wanted to make it complex and I wanted to make it where even though we find out that it's not the way, it's not the righteous way, it's not the perfect way, it's not the correct way. And even though there's a lot of cruelty and indifference, every once in a while there are characters that show something that's very different than everybody else. And in an organic way, like maybe a small moment of compassion or sympathy. So, anyways, this is kind of like the backdrop. And I was thinking about using the word heresy, like and it's connected to more of Christianity, is connected to religion, because I was thinking of one of the top sins, and I'm like, maybe I'll use oath breaker. So oath breaker I think was a little bit more universal. So one of the worst crimes is breaking the oath. In fact, they have a saying, a hesitant chagu is an unworthy. So when you get to unworthiness, it's like it's one of the worst crimes. Not only is the colony disappointed with you, not only is your own mother disappointed with you, that your own God is disappointed in you. That's pretty harsh. So, anyways, whenever there's moments when there's this like moments to converse, it's always like, why are you stopping? Why are you talking? Your whole function is to labor. You don't have room or time for anything else. And that's indoctrinated in them. Right. So, anyways, so I wanted to create a system where they were totally indoctrinated. I will use a matrix language. They were totally blue pilled without knowing that they're blue pilled. Right. And yet, if we think about now, it's just like, well, are there people like that? Yes, yes, yes. if it's very easy if I look at the how our society works, especially with the labor force. I mean, think about corporations. Think about those who would like totally bite the bullet for who they're working for because they have this false idea what loyalty means or what professionalism means or integrity means. And so it doesn't matter if you're an ant in a chagu society or if you're working in a corporation. There are forms of indoctrination. There are forms of making you feel what is guilty and what is worthy. And so I wanted to write it on different levels, and I wanted to write it in a way that like almost everybody can read it and say, "Oh wow, this hits me from this perspective," right? Not just one door. This is it. So, anyways, we have the mother, and so, anyways, as the main character Kijivu, which I said before means gray in Bantu, but I just shorten it for Kiji. So even though Kiji is eventually transforming and she's experienced a lot of cruelty, there's still this lingering, there's still this connection with mother. And I think this is important. I think our roots are important, regardless of how bad they are, because even to the very end, well, almost the end, there's still this hope, right? And it's just like it's kind of like you're still hoping that somebody can kind of take off their glasses of how they see the world and realize, wait a minute, is this the right way? Isn't there a better way? A way of where there's more love and compassion and understanding and what's fair and what really justice is and true integrity and what inner worthiness is and personal power. So so basically, yeah, it's just really not, I mean, I talk about Maluki and it's just like, oh, this is kind of a character. It's easy to judge, right? But I believe that we can connect this also, like I was saying before, to the systems around us, right? And it's just like, how do I make this relevant? So it's just like, okay, I'm talking about my book, which I love. And it's just like, I need to make this relevant. So there's relevance for me on a personal level, but there's relevance. I want to make it relevance for everybody. And that relevance could be anything from like, societal pressure to familial systems to burnout at your work. Think about any system that you don't question. Think about the systems you don't doubt. And they could be super small and they could be super subtle, but they exist. So the idea is like, okay, I want to talk about the character, a little bit about the societal structure, kind of give the name, why I chose that name, and then kind of like, all right, so where do we go with that? Well, let's make it relevant. Let's connect it. So I can go broad, talk about the couple things I just said, but then I can ask you, right, who or what was your Maluki growing up, right? Where or how has guilt or worthiness um, forced you or made you choose paths that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise? So, so for me, I wanted to write it in a way of like, how can this connect to me? Like, here's this character. I really don't like this character, but let's take a step back and say, wait a minute. What are there things that make me feel guilty? Or I do things because I try to get somebody's approval? And why am I doing these things to get somebody's approval? How has guilt or worthiness affected my life. It could be in a relationship. It could be it could be a romantic relationship, platonic relationship. It could be a boss employee relationship. It's like, what are you seeking? What do you want? And so when I look at Kiji, her transformation, and I might use the term rebellion, but it's a very silent rebellion. Well, maybe. And in this transformation, she starts to doubt. And that's what changes everything. And this is what changes everything. And she finds it. And so I'll share a scene in chapter 1, right? Which it's for free on the Awaken the Colony website. That is kind of like my landing page for the book. So she's a sweeper, and sweepers are those who find the dead, that because there's always constant death. There's constant birthing. So there's there's a cycle. You see it. There's constant death, but there's also constant, ants being born and those are dying. So biologically, in the real world, ants are like one of the cleanest organisms on the planet. They're constantly cleaning themselves. They don't like to live in anything that's dirty. So not only are they constantly cleaning themselves, they're constantly cleaning where they live underground. So any form of like when they die, there's this oleic acid. It's very pungent. So they know, and immediately they got to get them out. So I decided to turn it into a caste system. So the youngest ones, the sweepers, they go around and they sweep the dead. And so she comes across these sweepers that she's never seen before, deep down. And this is super important. And I don't want to go in a different direction, but she volunteers to go into what is called the unders. And the unders is the deepest part of the subterranean colony. And the reason why it's so dangerous, where nobody wants to go, is because basically they were digging and digging because they're constantly excavating, where there's this water bed, this water pocket, and it flooded it out. And so even though now most of the water is gone, it's been abandoned for such a long time, but yet chagus, they go there to die. And, the sweeper doesn't know that. But she comes across these two chagu that have lived a very toilsome life. And they find one, and all of a sudden there's something underneath, like these like twigs and roots and pieces of leaf. And when they remove it, they realize that there's these two chagu and they're holding each other. And this is very unchagu because, like I said, there's lots of rules. There's lots of rules. And one of the rules is there's no affection. There's no physical affection. There's no time for it. You're embraced once by mother, and that's all you need, because your job is to labor until you die. And if you're worthy enough, then you will feast. So paradise, you will feast with your divine mother in this chamber of everlasting food. And so she's like, well, why did they come down here? And she starts questioning it. And then there's a moment when her and another sweeper, they take the bodies to this place. It's kind of like where all the other sweepers are. And she's pausing there for a moment. And I think this is, for me, an important scene, because imagine like dozens and dozens of these sweepers ritualistically carrying these dead. So they have to carry the dead in a proper way, So movement, how they do things aesthetically is super, super important. And so anyways, they kind of take the dead onto there's these piles of dead, because there's lots of them. And there's a moment before she goes back down in the deep, she's looking at the body that she just put on the mountain, this pile of dead. And all these other sweepers from other tunnels are coming in, and the pile's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But everyone is just doing it very mechanically. And there's a moment where she's looking, and she's seeing the faces of all these dead. And like she was, indoctrinated to believe that if you are worthy, and if you labor till death, and if you overcome starvation and um, extreme toil or extreme heat, or breaking limbs, or your antenna or your skin is boiling, and it's just, or you're you're constantly in border wars. It's just like, where is the peace? Where is the joy? Where is the love? Where is the excitement? And so she's looking at all these faces of her dead sisters, and it's just pain, it's regret, it's suffering, it's loneliness, it's sorrow. And so she's looking around, and she's looking at the dead, and then she's looking at her sister sweepers, and everything is mechanical, right? Everything is mechanical. The reason why that scene for me is very important, and I'll share a personal experience. And and I think the story I'm about to tell you is a true story. It happened to me, and I don't have a lot of blame for what happened, and I'll explain later. So, this was years ago. My son, so number three, um, when he was 1 years old, it was exactly the day of his birthday. I was in this apartment complex, and I had to walk, probably about 5 minutes to my motorcycle to go to work. And I remember it was January 28th. It was very cold, and I was in this underground parking lot but part of it was closed, part of it was open. And I remember I saw something. It looked like a bag of clothes. And I was walking, and I'm just like, please don't tell me that's a body. Please don't tell me that's a body. And I walked up to it, and it was somebody who had committed suicide. It was somebody who had jumped off the ninth floor in the apartment complex. And so there he is. And I'm looking at this person. I'm all alone. And so obviously, like, it's like this moment I'm trying to process. And so I call the police, and the police are coming, and eventually other neighbors come out. And I remember that this woman came running out, and she she kind of like jumped over the body and got into her car, and she was trying to back out, but she couldn't because the body was blocking it. And she almost hit the body. And she was asking anyone there, "Can you please help me move my car? I'm late for work." And it was pretty crazy because I'm thinking, what a horrible person, right? It's like, what the fuck? And then looking at it now, it's just like, really? Do we live in a system that just desensitizes us? Like, it's just like, do we do things that are mechanical and ritualistic, and that human side of us is gone? Because in order to survive our Chagu society, we have to push away what makes us unique, also things that are very important, such as empathy and compassion. And like, you have to be kind of like the cog in the machine. And I just remember this person trying to back up and getting angry because that body was blocking her car. So why am I sharing this? Is because I could point my finger at her and say, "What the fuck are you doing?" Right? There's a dead person here, respect it. But it's like, going back to my book in that scene, it's just like, and she was looking around, Kiji was looking around thinking, wait a minute, can we pause for a moment? What are we doing? Can we, as sweepers, acknowledge the fact that the bodies that we sweep, none of them look peaceful. They're all tattered, they're all torn. They show serious signs of malnutrition. A lot of them don't have all their limbs. A lot of them are scarred. It's like, if this is the perfect way, then why do we end up like this, right? So there isn't that questioning. It's just like, yeah, clock in, clock out. So, I call this the story of awakening just for a lot of things. And I use the term silent. And I think this is important for me because as the queen is able to maintain order, now, of course, she uses her soldiers as her muscle. But there's most of the time they're not needed because the system is so well oiled or well tuned that through these weapons of guilt and worthiness, um, these chagu operate in a way that is unnatural, but for them it's natural, and it feeds the pyramid, you know. And so I think in order to survive that system, people become numb, and so everyone around her is numb until she starts doubting the system, and she starts doing things that nobody has done. There's another scene where she's begging to give extra food from the storage chambers to those who are sick. And so she's able to do it, but she has to lie to get this extra food. And as she's going down, she bumps into a soldier, Minascari, and of course, he's mad at her because he thinks that she's hiding and that she has all this food. So there's gluttony. That's another sin. You're lazy. You're unworthy. You oath breaker. So it's this constant. It's constant. For all the small things. She's like, no, I'm going to go down and feed her sisters who are sick and dying. And there's this moment where this soldier grabs the biggest piece of food and shoves it in her mouth. And she says, the weak and dying are not my sisters. So there's another layer, right, of the chagu or the strong, and weakness is not allowed, not even those who get injured. And so when she goes down and gives food to the weak and dying, it's just like it's never happened before. And so there's this overwhelming moment from both sides of like you're doing something that's unchagu-ish, but yet at the same time, not only are we breaking what we believe is true, but it's also saving us. So there's a lot of moments where, it's just like, is this really the right way to live? And so that Tao ends up transforming her into somebody that is awakened. And I mean, it's a little bit more complex than that. um, a lot more complex, and there's other characters I haven't talked about. So it's I think why I wanted to use silence is because in with Kiji's, when she does get to a point where she's strong enough to actually, let's say, leave, it's not like this boisterous typical revolution that you might read about in the history books since 19th century of all historical wars that, when people were like marching and screaming and yelling, even now with, the landscape of all conflicts, the yelling and the screaming. What I wanted was the revolution was an internal revolution, and that transformation was soft. And I really believe, and I say this so many times, and if you hear me say it again, there's a wonderful band I love called Passenger, and there's this beautiful song, and there's this piece in this song that basically says, in a world that only yells and shouts, all I want to do is whisper. And so for me, that was important. Her rebellion, her transformation is a whisper. And so even though there's a whisper from the queen of it's a it's a whisper of when they're born, she tells them a few things and then she kind of disappears from their life. Now, not necessarily because she does surface a lot, because there's so many things that happen, which I won't talk about. But so I'm using silence on both ends. There's a silent transformation from Kiji that ends up spreading. And then there's this kind of like, not necessarily silence, but there's this distance from the mother. So the mother becomes present at birth when there are important moments in the colony, but then she kind of hides. She has her huge, luxurious, regal chamber full of, her own slaves and everything else. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about the queen, herself as a character, because it's just like, oh wow, she's kind of intense. She's very severe, but it's like, are we born that way, or is it also us being indoctrinated, right? Being indoctrinated. So, especially when we're young, it makes such an impression. And I'll use a silly example just to kind of let everybody understand a little bit more what I'm talking about. Is like when we're young, we're very impressionable. So when we're young, it sticks with us. And I remember where we used to live when I was little, that we had this big yard, and all these mushrooms would pop up. And I remember my mom saying, "Never touch the mushrooms. They're poisonous. They're poisonous." I don't know how many times she said that. There was different types of mushrooms. I'm sure they weren't. But anyways, but she said it so many times that now I struggle to eat mushrooms. And you're just like, oh, okay, that's kind of silly. Okay, it is, but it's a silly example to kind of like stop, stay, think about your mushrooms, right? What is something that was planted in you that now it's 100% true? Now, what I'm saying is obviously where we are now, it's not like I'm going to question 100%. Mine is more of an internal moral compass, right? I think now there are systems that use guilt and worthiness, um, you know, especially at work. I think they're very good at manipulating people to become slaves. Um, it's just kind of like, I need to do this to get that promotion. Why do you need that promotion? Oh, more status or more money or whatever it is. It could be a familial system. So something that's operating in the family, as far as I need to do more show and tell. It could be on so many levels. It could be on so many levels. So my whole purpose is, from this book that I love, that I put so much time and energy into it, is just kind of like a lot of self-reflection, right? It's like, where am I now? Um, and I think, that's it. And what I didn't want is the soapbox. I think I talked about the soapbox in the last stream, where it's just like, I didn't. It has to be silent, because I think in silence, that's the most powerful transformation, right? It's like I remember I used to have a debate clubs. And yeah, there are techniques and there's ways. And one of the things is, if you're fast at speaking and you can articulate in a structured way, usually you win. But here, it's like the opposite of debating. It's like, if I want to prove something to you, it's usually who has the louder voice or the biggest muscle, right? Or who's the angriest. Those are the three things I've seen in different situations that usually win the room. And that's not how I my only personal belief is that's not how you convince, truly. That's not how you really communicate where you are truly. Like, everything has to be in a way where there's none of that. It has to be in a way that's subtle and soft. Therefore, we're more receptive. So, my fellow people, thank you for staying with me and listening to me as I talked about the wonderful Queen Maruki. Anyways, I'm super excited about this book. I love talking about it. I could talk about it forever. Hopefully, I didn't get too crazy, and hopefully, you didn't get lost as far as where I was going. But yeah, it's really, really cool. So I'm really excited for the next stream. And I really appreciate any feedback, or any questions, if you have any right now. But like I said, it says, the story of an awakening. Well, awakening has many definitions. What does it mean for you? Like, you're going to read the book, right? And I think it's a fucking amazing book. No bias. But it's one of those things where it's just like, if I was ever going to be a writer, it's going to be one of those things of, what is the message I'm sending, right? Yeah, I have a difficult time reading something that there's no message, right? So, what is that subtle message, right? So, anyways, have a wonderful Saturday, and just stay tuned for updates. And I will see you next Saturday. Oh, we got some peeps. Ooh, I got a wonderful question from my wonderful good friend come out. How does the small voices in the book reconcile with the notion that the loudest voice in the rooms win? Um, because that's a really, really good question. I think, um, now this is personally, if I am convinced, right, of my own inner voice, I don't need to scream, I don't need to shout. So even though my voice isn't screaming or shouting, I stay firm in my choice. And that small voice, even though vibrationally it's soft, inside, I'm an anchor. I'm an anchor to all those who have loud voices, but there's no anchor. And this is just from personal experience that I've come across, that people use these as weapons of being loud or showing somehow that they're physically strong or showing some kind of moments of anger. For me, those are just weak displays. I would rather somebody be anchored and carry a small voice. So that's kind of how I reconcile it. Um, I I hope that answered it. Now, if I had to do it in a practical way, it's like, well, okay, so if I'm in a room and I'm surrounded by a lot of people, especially in a work environment, and we're trying to make a decision and the loudest one wins, it's like, yeah, that in that case, that's very difficult because everybody's kind of fighting. Like all these plants are fighting for that small sunlight, yet there's no such thing as small sunlight. It's abundance for everyone. So yeah, but more mine is more on a personal level, right? So I would connect the small voice to being, anchored. Yes, the next stream is on Saturday, and we will not have any technical problems. And I will be very, very happy because my Kickstarter campaign will have already started. So yes, 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 yes. Well, thanks, Kamal. I'm gonna send you a chat right now. Thanks, bud. Yeah, I really appreciate it, and your what you just commented made it sound like, okay, maybe I am trying to express the gray ant in a way that can be relevant for a long, long time. Um, it really doesn't matter, it's 2025, but it could be 1915, okay? It could be 1825. It doesn't really matter. I think it would test the time because I'm always, and this is just me personally, I believe we all have a gift. Um, and I really believe that connection, um, is something that makes us very human, but something that helps us over times that we're struggling. And I think that if we're able to connect on a very, I'll use a term, spiritual level, energetical level, just different levels, we are a lot more strengthened. And that would be the balanced, the harmonious colony, right? Where people, instead of calculating your results of what worthiness is, it's like, wait a minute, you're already worthy, bro. You're already worthy. You don't need external units of measurement to say that you're worthy. So again, just on a personal level, I think systems, a lot of them exist so they can function. I believe that systems function to keep them operating. I mean, I look at it like corporations or a lot of systems like giant gyms. Gym will close down unless there's people in there. So I need to get people in there, regardless of how. Um, and so the one thing that I've noticed, you know, is it's like if we think about now, it's just like, wait, even though I might be doing something I don't like, or I believe in something that I don't like, what do I do? Well, I think we all have moments of it's time to transform. It's time to have our own awakening of realizing I have to shed this part of me that is an old belief system that did nothing for me. I have to shed belief systems that are no longer taking me to where I need to take. And so that's why the main character, Kiji, even though she's a soldier ant and they're all born with amber honey skin, she eventually gets all these gray spots, right? It's kind of like shedding that skin. So I think at any age, I think it's important to look around and say, okay, how can I find my road? How can I be strong enough to follow that road? And when I do follow that road, I don't need to scream or be violent. And it's like the proper road it's very internal. You'll know it's the right one. So anyways, okay. That was a super long answer. Anyways, we're almost at 52 minutes. So anyways, I'm sending everybody lots of love. I'm sending out lots of love to my tribe. Thank you. I appreciate that you guys listened to me for the last 60 minutes. So you're still alive. And I'm just sending just lots of love and appreciation for all those who gave up their time. So I'm super excited. I can't wait for it to come out. I'll keep you up to date. And if there's no more questions, I will say goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Okay. All right. I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you at the next stream next Saturday. Signing off.